Hello, hi, um, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our panelists, Nandan Nilekani, Tanuj Bhojwani, and our moderator for today, Dr. Pramath Sinha. My name's Akriti, and I work with Ashoka's Alumni Relations Office. The topic for today's discussion is navigating balance in a digital age. Nandan and Tanuj have recently published a book called The Art of Bitfulness. And we thought it's a very relevant topic in today's day and age, and we were very happy to extend an invite to the entire Ashoka community. A little preface to the session. Um, the book dwells on the overwhelming presence and impact of technology, the internet, gadgets, and apps in our daily lives. So, the authors today will be sharing their research around navigating the tricky space that is today's overcrowded digital age. A short introduction to our panelists. Um, Nandan is the co founder and chairperson of Infosys Technologies Limited. He was the founding chairman of the Unique Identification Authority of India. Most recently, Nandan has co founded and is chairperson of EkStep, a not for profit effort to create a learner centric, technology based platform to improve basic literacy and numeracy for millions of children. In 2006, he was awarded the Padma Bhushan and named Business Person of the Year by Forbes Asia. Tanuj Bhojwani is an alum of Ashoka University. He was a part of the Young India Fellowship batch of 2014. He also holds a chemical engineering degree from IIT Bombay. So currently, he's a fellow at iSpirit Foundation, where he works on policy issues related to digital identity, payments, data protection, and roles. Our moderator, Dr. Pramath Sinha, is a pioneering force in Indian higher education and needs no introduction. He is a founder and trustee at Ashoka University and is the founder and chairman of Harappa Education. He is the founding dean and a member of the executive board of ISB and the CEO of Ananda Bazar Patrika Group, a partner at McKinsey and Company, and the founder of 9.9 Group. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and for doing this for us. Um, and I'd also like to extend a special thank you to Bhashwar, who helped me put together this session. A few housekeeping rules. I'm sure all of us are experts at Zoom now, but just the format of the session is for the first 30 minutes, it will be a conversation between our moderator and the panelists, after which we'll welcome questions from the audience, and they can put their questions in the chat box, which would be directed to our moderator. And we're also live streaming it on YouTube. So the link will be shared with you, and you can look at it later or share it with your friends and family. So thank you so much, and let's get right into it. I'll hand the session over to Dr. Pramath.
Thank you, Akriti, and thank you, Bhashwar. People like to say good things at the start of a session like this, but I genuinely want to say that I'm so delighted. It's hard to get time with Nandan. I don't think I've had an hour with Nandan ever. I don't know, Tanuj, how you found time to work with him and write the book. I really envy you. So I'm just delighted that I have this time with both of you. And both people I've have fondness for in very different ways, and it's great to be talking to you today. The biggest benefit of this session when I signed up to do this is that I actually read the book. I was going to read it anyway. I pre-ordered the book. I couldn't not order a book, Nandan, not by you, but by Tanuj, a Young India fellow writing a book with Nandan Nilekani. It's a feather in my cap, if I may take some credit. But jokes apart, I have to tell you, and I tell everyone on this call that I think it's a book everyone should read. Honestly, I said you are being a bit gimmicky with this bitfulness thing when I saw that. But honestly, that book is solid gold in terms of the thought that you've put into it. And I loved the fact that you used so many examples, stories, you dug up so much research. I mean, this is something that just broadens your mind generally about psychology, about behavior science, about technology, and so on. So I'm right now just, I mean, I literally just finished reading the book. You can't see it in the blurring, and I'm just teeming with it. So I have lots of questions. I've been told to restrict myself to 20 minutes. I will keep to that. Obviously, the question, yeah, everybody is talking about tech taking over and us being so obsessed, it being toxic, and so on. Why this book and why now? And I'd like to hear it from both perspectives. So Nandan, please go
Yeah.
ahead.
Thank you, Pramath, and thank you for your wonderful words. A big part of the credit of this book goes to Tanuj, who, as you said, is a Ashoka Young India Fellow alumni. And he has a rare advantage of being both a technology guy from IIT and a graduate of Ashoka. So he combines both left brain and right brain thinking, which is responsible for this book. I think this book actually is a child of the pandemic, Pramath, because during the pandemic, our dependence on digital went up even more. We did everything now. We ordered our food, we ordered e-commerce, we watched Netflix, we talked to our relatives on Zoom. So I think this digital acceleration that happened in the pandemic was showed us that even more the dependence we have on digital technology. And at the same time, I found many people feeling overwhelmed by technology, being constantly irritable, doom scrolling, worrying about the future. So clearly, there was something, or getting angry about something or the other. And we realized that, while this technology is an enormous boon, and I've been a big believer in technology for transformation in both business and in society for 40 years, it's also can have a debilitating impact on people because they're overwhelmed. And we were surprised that nobody had really addressed the challenge of digital hygiene on how we use technology in a more effective manner. And it so happened that Tanuj and I had been working together for several years on many of these public digital goods of India, like UPI and so on. And one of the things I discovered in the pandemic to break the monotony of being at home was to start a walk in the park series where I'm very fortunate in Bangalore. We have a lot of parks in the park next to my house. So every day in the morning, I would do a 1 hour walk, and I would invite different colleagues and friends to join me on the walk. Very safe, open air, mask, all that stuff. And Tanuj was one of my partners in these walks, and he lives close by in Koramangala. And then, as we got talking, we realized that this was a challenge that he was also dealing with, how to deal with this digital onslaught. And then we compared notes on our techniques and found that though we have, 30-year gap, he's half my age. In the conceptual approach to technology, we both had the same. And then we said maybe there's value in documenting this and sharing it with people, because I think people can improve their digital hygiene, get on top of technology, use it and become better at using it, then that's a nice thing to do. So that's how it all began, Pramath. Over to you, Tanuj.
First of all, thank you to the both of you. Very nice things have been said. I am just responding to those might take up the rest of 30 minutes or not. But thank you, Pramath, honestly, for reading the book, for saying that sincerely. You're right. The title, all said and done, we still have to get out and get a book into the hands of people. So yes, it is meant, it is designed to capture your attention, to get you to pause and think about what that word means. But like you said, hopefully it's not gimmicky in its content. I'm glad you got the book. Thank you, Nandan, for that endorsement. I think Nandan covered the story of how it happened in terms of at a high level, that these walks in the park were genuinely a sense of relief for the both of us, and acknowledging that it's a sense of relief led us to ask this question, why, and why we're all feeling this way. Then we went out and we spoke to a bunch of people, and we realized there's many others who are doing this, but there's also that sense of taking back control and reclaiming your time and attention. Everybody had their own hacks. their own methods of doing this. Usually it's Nandan saying this, I'm copying his words. He says that, he's the one who recognizes this as a third crisis, right? He recognizes as something as important as...
And Tanuj, sorry to interrupt you, but I thought that was a very, that was a truly a sort of insightful perspective for me. So I don't want you to give away everything in the book. I want people to read it.
Sure.
But it'll be good to just explain that, because that was one of my questions. And I think everybody needs to understand that aspect. Because we are just users and we are innocent users, but we don't understand the real crisis behind how we are behaving. So please do expand on that.
Let me then just start and take it off, and then Nandan can probably give the bigger picture. Is that so all of us feel this sense of overwhelm with our technology. We feel like we are constantly on, can't switch off. These are the words that we hear from people a lot. Burnt out. This is how people describe their problems, or distracted, unfocused. Now, usually people blame one of two things: either themselves, as I don't have willpower, I don't have control, or they blame okay, Facebook is evil, or like, the Instagram is doing this deliberately to steal my attention, or they're taking my data away. And on the other hand, we have this set of problems that we usually keep separate from these two conversations, which is stuff like, misinformation, polarization, fake news, etc., which are also something that we should all be concerned about, and we rightly talk about these issues in silos. One thing that we hope to illuminate through this book is that these individual problems and these collective problems are connected. They are connected by the same underlying model, which is how are technology companies built today, with what purpose, what is the mechanisms that fund them, that encourage them, that the media that supports them. There's all an ecosystem that is driving us towards an outcome, which is it's one of the names we use in the book is slippery slopes of scale, because unlike slippery slopes, usually people imagine going like this, but the slippery slopes of scale go like this, which means that when you're on it, your friends are actually encouraging you and sort of pushing you to go further down towards that scale exponential growth curve, which leads to the same outcomes. I mean, Facebook, when it starts, it's cute. It's this thing to connect college apps and college students. And then, a few years later, we're here where we all have a problem with it, but we don't draw that connection. So this is the fundamental idea that we call the third crisis. But the reason why we wrote the book, coming back to your first question, and let Nandan sort of talk about.
Yeah, so I think why do we call it the third crisis? We felt that the world is quite familiar with two crises. One is the health crisis, the pandemic, our experience of the last 2 years, where a rapidly infectious virus has really brought us all, down to our knees, completely locked out, and economies have been stalled and so on. And the second crisis is the climate crisis, which is much more longer term, but equally something that we worry about, because we have only one planet. And how do we make sure that we keep this planet safe and doesn't overheat? And for both these crises, there is an individual solution and a collective solution. So for the pandemic, the individual solution is we do social distancing, we wear masks, we don't go to crowded places and so on. And the collective solution is how do we use things like vaccines to create immunity, herd immunity. So there's both an individual solution and a collective solution. Similarly, for climate, at the individual level, we encourage people to travel less, or to eat, not to eat red meat or other things which create more carbon footprint, and create a low carbon lifestyle. And at the collective level, we look at converting to electric vehicles or bringing a carbon tax and so on. But for this third crisis, which is the rapidly use of technology for all kinds of trivial things, as I said, I'm a great believer in technology, but if we spend 4 hours a day watching 15-second videos, then that's not really technology for me. And in the third crisis, neither are there solutions for individuals, nor is there a thinking about how society can deal with them. That's why this book addresses both how the problem began, how individuals can cope with it in a non-judgmental way. It's not about saying you're weak and all that. And how does society think of alternative ways to organize such an important infrastructure to be more equitable and more innovative and less concentrated? So that's really the third crisis, and an individual solution and a collective solution, Pramath.
Yes, and I thought that that was where I think it is very intelligent. And you may not think how brilliant that connection is, because Nandan, you've been so involved in that collective bit. I like the way you connected the individual to some of the work you have done around the India stack, and you called it protocol-based interoperability. I said, my God, how did we get from bitfulness to protocol-based interoperability? But you do. I mean, there is a very nuanced connection. And that I thought was really the intelligent part of the book. Do you think that you would, listen, you're off the chart smarts, but do you think that that experience of doing UID and all of that thinking helped make those two things come together? Because they're, usually everybody is focused on the individual and doesn't think the collective.
Well, first of all, Pramath, if you look at my history of books, this is my third book. And both the first two books were big policy books about how to change India and all that stuff. And the fact of the matter is that for many people that is not relevant. They say, okay, fine, you want to change India, but so what? What does that have to do with me? And it was Tanuj who said that we should connect the personal to the collective. And that if we are able to provide a solution at the personal level, also explain why we are where we are, and explain how, if we address some collective solutions, the personal side of it can also improve. That's how this happened. And I think that's why we have framed this both as a personal journey as well as how do we as a society think about such an important thing as digital infrastructure to be better and more useful to society.
Well, I'm obviously a real fan of the book, but I'm going to move from the collective to the appendix. The appendix literally has a series of 100 hacks, and I love it. If you were talking about reimagining and imagining India, whatever the earlier book was called, I don't remember what word you exactly used, but it was at a very high level. Here you are actually now giving us little tips on what to do. And I just wanted to tell people that, hey, if you don't read the book, read the stuff in the back. It reminds me of of my high school days, and when we were all preparing for the JEE, right? Because the answers used to be at the back almost. So yeah. What's your favorite hack, Tanuj, of all the hacks that you have there? I love the bit, by the way, about creating different identities. I thought that was really brilliant, and I'm going to do that. And you've given the step-by-step thing in each operating system how to create an identity. But what is your favorite hack?
So I want to plug in a few things right here. Number one, at some point in the writing process, things got like we had a lot to do, and then doing those 100 hacks and making such a detailed thing was going to be quite an uphill task and hard. And there's a lot of other things. I keep saying that a book is sort of just a few tens of thousands of tiny details. If you get them all right, you have a book, right? So the appendix in that section was actually Ila Deep. She's an undergrad from Ashoka. She really helped with this. So plug there. It's very helpful in the book and then afterwards in helping us get the word out about the book. So you have yourself to thank again for that, Pramath, for that appendix. But yeah, a personal hack. I mean, okay. So if the question that comes down to me, get asked often, is that one thing that if people could do, and that would be like a Pareto, maybe not 80-20, but at least 50% of what I would say is that what you put your finger on. Create a separate identity on, like, it is a fresh page, it is a new start. Create that new identity. We've given detailed instructions in the book, but the idea is if you create a new identity on your device, on your laptop or your phone, it is as good as a new phone or a new computer. This time around, be thoughtful, be mindful of what you're adding, because our default is to just add everything into our home screen. And we are becoming our own worst enemies in the future, because now these notifications and other things will pop at you the choice to waste your time on a game is right next to your email or your whatever else is important to you. So by just creating a little boundary for yourself with a new identity, I have found, feedback that comes back to me. One, for example, this person who really wanted to read this, take 3 hours and read a research paper. They couldn't. They did it once they created a new identity that very day. People who actually separate the curate mode. You would think this is only about create, but very close friend and colleague of ours, Nikhil, his problem was he would never switch off from work. So by creating, and the only thing he would do with his wife in the pandemic is that they would watch Netflix, would watch movies together, etc. But by creating a separate profile, when they're on Netflix and you want to pause, go next or whatever, he's no longer checking Slack. And that really helped his sort of, relationship and marriage.
And Pramath, I just want to add that all those hacks are again all the contribution of Tanuj. My model is actually simpler. I just use 3 different devices. So I have my laptop for my create. My laptop is, when I sit at my laptop, I have the right lighting and I know I'm going to do work, I'm going to write something. I have no interruptions. And I do all my curate on my iPad where I read and follow television, follow Netflix or any of the streaming channels. And I use my phone only for communication, either a phone call or a text message, and I don't use any messaging apps. So that way, when I pick up a device, I already know where I'm going to be. So, so that's very important. Whereas Tanuj, I think, has come out with a brilliant idea that obviously everybody can't have 3 devices and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
With only one device, how do they use a software identity profile approach? And that's really the great thing about the book. And think about the physical world, Pramath. See, when I go to a library, I go there to read or write. It's very quiet. It's a very, very peaceful environment. When I go into a bar, it's a boisterous environment to socialize and have a few drinks. When I go to a gym or a park, it is to exercise and breathe fresh air. So in the physical world, when we go to different places, we are able to switch our context. The challenge we have in digital is that everything is one click away. And therefore, unless you create that, then you end up being all over the place.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how, for the same sort of the way you created different physical contexts, Tanuj, 30 years later, your junior, if I can call him that, is creating 3 digital contexts. And that to me, again, was very interesting. Yeah. I want to quickly switch gears because I have limited time. I think this is a very unique relationship, Nandan and Tanuj. And for Nandan, you to be where you are, to partner with a young person like Tanuj, I don't know if there are examples of this, right? People work together, but not on such a substantial project. This is a substantial project. And it's going to not end here. I think you've created something that is going to go on. Tell me a little bit about from your perspective, Tanuj. I think, Tanuj, you'd be the envy of every young person to say, okay, maybe I can't get Nandan, but can I find other mentors, partners like that? What do you think happened to lead you to building that kind of a relationship with Nandan? And Nandan, from your perspective, a lot of people our age want to mentor young people, want to work with young people, are not able to quite. Would you give us some tips from both your perspectives on how do you make such partnerships happen and in such a meaningful and substantial way?
Sure. Tanuj, start.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously, credit to the Young India Fellowship. Look, I come from an IIT background, right? So there is this, and sometimes I feel like I rub a lot of people the wrong way when I speak about my college and the experience I've had. Has not necessarily been great from a personal development front. Yes, I learned a lot of things. I was with a lot of smart people, but I feel like everybody there wanted the same things, which to me did never really struck as true, as things to desire. So I spent a lot of my, almost immediately after I got my first job in consulting, quit it. And almost immediately after that, I was on a path to finding, now I can call it meaning. It would have been too obnoxious to call it that at 21, 22. But I did. That's what I was doing. I was following my nose. I was following my curiosity. If anything, even in the dedication section of the book, right, there's only one thing I write, which is the one defining trait I think I have, is that I am curious. And I credit my parents for teaching me to ask questions and not simply be satisfied with the first answer you share. And that curiosity led me, amongst other places, to the Young India Fellowship, where again, I would it's not taking a straight line path to anything. But I think one of the courses I want to highlight, we had a professor, Mihir Shah, who was at the time part of the NAC, the National Advisory Council, and the Planning Commission. So this is somebody who is writing policy at the highest levels, is essentially enacting very large things in the country that really affect the lives of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. And in that class, him and I would go toe to toe, right? It's really funny because he would call me Mr. Capitalist. He would think I am far too right of where he stands. Nandan thinks I'm far too left of where he stands. It's really funny that I've had people I've got to interact with, but the thing that got built in that class is that I could stand up, I could question, I could have ideas and thoughts that were genuinely entertained, were genuinely answered, were genuinely challenged both ways, I would hope. And the confidence that gives you in your own ability to see these things, these big projects, not as something that other people do or other smart people do, but something that you can contribute to. That honestly happened at the Young India Fellowship, also because of the sort of, not that one course is one example that stands I remember clearly, because even at the time I was a little intimidated, right, by somebody like that, and to then not only stand up and contribute in the class, but to go again. And Pramath might know this. I tend to voice my opinion when I disagree, right? I don't tend to keep it in. So I think what that does is it gives you a sense of confidence, and then honestly a lot of credit to Nandan. I showed up at his office during demonetization at its peak, because UPI was happening, and I started working with, I was in Bombay, they were in Bangalore, and they were like, what are you doing there? We need all hands on deck, come. And I came, and in the very first meeting, right, he asked me to, like, discussing how do we do this, it's a chaotic period in time. He actually paused the meeting to ask me what I think. That made a huge impression, that this is somebody who, it's not just, okay, we have one person sitting there as diversity, like it's not like one young person there. He actually wanted to listen to what I had to say, which honestly is, I would say, it's not very common, that trait. And so therefore, the other half of that credit is him. He's, I think, taken chances on me, including this book, which I don't understand why. So that part of the question we should ask him.
Well, I think Pramath, I really enjoy working with smart young people, because that energizes me, that makes me feel younger, and I get a window of a worldview which I don't have. So it's really, for me, it's a great experience. And so I think it's been terrific working with Tanuj. As I said, he's both a left brain and a right brain guy, which is rare. He's an IITian with a liberal arts background, thanks to Ashoka. So I think as I interacted with him, I said, this guy is an interesting guy, because he seems to be different. He's not the typical, he's not on that roller coaster kind of thing. And there are two things that I feel I've contributed to Tanuj. One is I've made him more calm. He would get all het up about things. And my biggest contribution was to tell him to chill out a bit and relax, that nothing is so bad that we need to get thing. And the second thing is to focus on something for a long time, in the sense that, Tanuj has done a lot of things in his life, but sitting down for 2 years to produce this book was like a marathon instead of a sprint. I'm hoping that these two things will rub off on him.
No, that last bit of advice, I think, is very valuable, especially young people these days want to do a lot, but they want to do it all in a hurry. And I think that's part of what you write about in the book.
So I think, testament to that, I think this is, personally, there's one which is writing this book is very visible. The other part, only a few people would know, that in the last year, I also lost 30 kilos, right? Which is essentially the same thing. Sit down, focus, don't be so impatient about results, right? Do the job every day, and it'll follow, right? Results follow. So that's also how I managed to sort of get my health in shape in the last year alongside.
So Tanuj, now that you've become the celebrity author, may I ask to partner with you to write a book about how you lost 30 kilos and how I lost 20 kilos in the pandemic?
All right.
My time is up, and I'm going to start picking up some of the questions from the audience. So Tanuj, here's a question from one of your batchmates, actually. Himanshu Ranjan is on the call, and he says there are certain phrases in the book, such as procrastination is not a time management problem, but an emotion management problem. The problem of choice paralysis, the need to get in the zone and flow, to write regularly in order to enhance the working memory, to design your environment. Could you elaborate a bit on all of these or this body of thinking?
Yeah, no, so all different ideas, and I can obviously write a whole book about them. But what I want to pick up a few and just sort of do this is that procrastination, now there's enough evidence to show that it's not that we are bad at managing time, it's that we simply are avoiding something. That avoidance can be because of anxiety, boredom, disgust. You don't want to clean the toilet. You don't want to think about your death, so you don't write a will. Even though it is very practical, very quick, and very useful for the people you really love, right? Like if something happens to you. So we don't avoid things simply because we don't have the time. We avoid things because we avoid things. So that was one. The other thing that, writing, I want to say this is that I think there's a huge emphasis even in Ashoka on writing. I don't know if you remember this, Pramath. I got an F in the writing course in Ashoka. I think one of the reasons is because we only look at it as a tool of communication, whereas it is also, most importantly, a tool of reflection of probably one of the oldest and the only ways of connecting with your own mind and making legible your own thoughts to yourself. So a lot of the ideas in there were about this, right? That you write more to, so the large overarching principle in the book, and I hope this is something that I'm happy to give away, even if you don't read the book, is that try not to use your phone as a window, but rather as a mirror, right? As something to reflect on, so instead of using it as a portal to escape, you're really using it to think back on what you're bothering with. And I think most of the ideas between me and Nandan, also the base agreement, which he said, he rightfully said he's sort of incepted in me, is the idea that you choose calm, productivity will follow, right? Most of us, people my age and where I was, want to choose productivity, want to have efficiency, do the most things, have the biggest resume, whatever. But it's the other way around. It's that learning has been super critical, and I hope people in the audience get it. So,
Nandan, do you want to react to that? And I just wanted to ask you to add that bit about the book is not about this, but about that. I don't want to give that punchline away, but you know what I'm talking about.
The book is not anti-tech; it is pro-you. It is.
Yeah,
that's right.
No, I think a lot of people said, you're a guy who's lived his life with technology. And this book sounds like a contrarian book coming from you. And I make the point that, look, this is not an anti-tech book at all. I'm a big fan of technology. I've used it all my professional life, whether it's at Infosys, Aadhaar, or whatever. And I've used it to make an impact and transform and so on. So I'm a big, big fan of technology. But the way this consumer tech has evolved, where people are getting completely, sort of using it far beyond and also impacting their mental health. That is the point that we're trying to make. And there are two solutions. But some people say switch off and become a monk. But that's not possible in today's world. You can't walk away from digital. It's going to be more and more in your life. So you have to find a way of coping with it and find a way of being on top of it rather than letting it overwhelm you. So that was the point that we were trying to make.
Yeah. And I thought the biggest point that you also made is not just to step away from tech, but to use that time productively.
Exactly.
And your early chapter, interestingly, are about how to think better and to think more and to think clearly, which I thought was very interesting. But again, I don't want to hog the time. Next question is really about this whole thing about Metaverse. And since you do talk about architecting the future in the last chapter, I was wondering, Nandan, what do you think of where we are headed with Metaverse and that whole extension of our lives into that virtual world?
Well, every time I hear the word Metaverse, I go for a walk in the park. So, well, I think, obviously, the idea is that you create a more immersive world where you can, and the pandemic has shown that, collaboration is going to be remote. the more we can simulate the real world, the more we can seem like we're sitting in a table with other people and meeting, the more you can have spatial audio, the more authentic the experience is. So there is arguments for all this. But at the same time, I think finally we have to make a choice between a balance between our digital life and a physical life. And we have to find the right balance because I think a lot of the value today is in the physical life. And we should obviously use our digital life, including Metaverse, to get great experiences, but we shouldn't sort of immerse ourselves so totally in that we sort of veer upon the physical world. So that's where I come from on the Metaverse. And let's see how it develops. There are many attempts now to create this so-called Metaverse. We'll have to see how but it's, I think, still some time away.
Tanuj, do you want to add to that, or should we take the next question?
No, let's take the next question. I think it's nothing.
Yeah, so the next question has to do with the fact that there are a lot of work dealing with digital overload in our lives, the dangers of excessive use, written by Western writers. The question refers to Cal Newport, Nicholas Carr. So how did you draw upon their work for this book, and how is your book different? Is there specific advice for Indian readers? And this is from Anuja Agarwal, who I think is an Ashoka parent and also a faculty at the Delhi Skills and Entrepreneurship University.
Tanuj, you want to answer that?
Sure. So, yes, there are a lot of other books. I think Nandan also says that there are two kinds of books, right? In this, that one says become a monk. So digital minimalism, etc., is essentially saying you don't need your devices. What is the point, and etc. And it was written a little while ago, I would say, in 5 years, which is 2 decades in the technology world. And then you have books which basically say a Facebook or an Instagram are like, they're attention merchants, they're attention pirates, they're out to get you, they're out to get your data. I think our book is, and this stems again from the common attitude that we both have, which is being pragmatic, right? The world is what it is. What are you going to do about it? So it is different in that sense that it says that, look, the reality is none of us, even this panel, for example, would not happen if we had a aversion to screen time altogether, right? And we were just like, no, every use of technology is bad. What we are trying to do, the goal of the book, which is different from all of them, is that we are saying that we want you to not spend less time on your devices, but to spend your time on your devices better. When you are saying, I want to sit down and say, make a document, write something, or do some work, then you're actually doing that work. When you sit down to scroll Twitter and you have 2 hours and you want to just scroll Twitter for 2 hours, please, by all means, do it. But then during that time, don't check your email and get stressed, right? So we are hoping to be able to give you the tools to align your attention with your intention. That is, I would say, the difference of this book. And then?
Yeah, and I think it certainly, I mean, it has an Indian context, but actually we feel that many of the lessons here are globally applicable. It's a challenge that people around the world are facing.
No, I think that if you actually read the book, it's globally applicable. And I think contrary to the other books, this notion of how, I think the two things that are unique are your connection to the collective, the third crisis, leading to that connection to the collective, as well as the specific, what I'm calling the hacks. That really does ring a bell, even for me, and I'm sure for lots of young people, because you're not just giving, as I say, gyan, you are actually telling people how to apply that gyan in their daily life and sort of the quintessential Monday morning. Shiti Gala, who's also a Young India Fellow alum, I don't know if Tanuj, she's your batch or...
No, she's not, but congratulations on the wedding, Shiti.
Yes, she just got married. Congratulations from us. How have behavioral insights shaped the book? Are there flaws of being human that the virtual world taps into, the need for gratification, confirmation bias, and so on? I think you do use that a lot, but I'll let you answer that, whoever wants to go first.
I'll start first and then Tanuj. Well, I think definitely a lot of the book delves into behavioral issues, how technologies are designed to take your attention, how engagement comes, the more polarizing the information is, and so on. And also that, often we seek solace in our devices because we don't want to deal with the real world issues. So I think definitely a lot of, and Tanuj has done a great research, reviewing the whole literature on behavioral stuff and brought those lessons into the book. Tanuj, go ahead.
So, look, we try our best to sort of tell a story, right? Like, I mean, this is again part of what we all know is that you can know everything, but there's no little convincing somebody or trying to help them make a change is a very different act altogether. So we try to be we try to draw on research and try to be honest to the nuance and specifics of that research, right? But the writing that we have is essentially is trying to relate those back to individual experiences, right? And just leave it at that question phase. Is that so we take, say, the example of a lot of people related to is this friend Dhruv, who, by the way, is Dhruv Bhola, Karan's brother, who's is he told me this at one of the conversations that I had before the book was being written. He said that, look, and I also always assume that him being a musician, his world is very different, his social media use is very different, not like mine. I can switch off, etc. But he said the same thing. He said that when I have something important to do, like balancing the books or doing some bills, etc., that's when I pick up my phone. That's when I start scrolling Instagram. I tell myself I'll do it in 5 minutes, I'll get back. And that 5 minutes turns into 1 hour, 1.5 hours. And then I panic. And then what do I do when I panic? To calm myself, I pick up Instagram and like start scrolling, and it's another half an hour gone. So we try to give these examples and sort of help people relate to their own experiences and experiences of the people we've spoken to, and try and draw a link between that individual experience with the theory that we know, and just try to present it and leave it at that, because ultimately, look, writing a good book is not about saying how smart Nandan and I are. It's not. What does it matter? It's writing a good book, according to me, is about how smart the readers feel at the end of it, right? Like how many new avenues they have to explore, what they can do. Can you ignite their curiosity? Can they go, look up something, learn something, change something about their lives? And we're hoping that this book has enough of these paths, not prescriptions, right, for you to then walk down.
Thank you for being so open and candid. The next question has to do with digital identity, and of course, you talk about that a lot in the book. But as your digital identity gets bigger and the weight of the data also becomes very powerful, especially when the governments, corporations want more control and more data on you, the question that is being asked, and there's no name associated with this one, is what is my role as one unit in the middle of these billions of users?
Well, let me start again, and then I'll ask Tanuj to take forward. See, I think identity, digital identity on the internet, I think there are two types of identity. There's real identity. I mean, there are many situations where you need to know that you are the person you claim to be, because you have to receive a benefit or you have to access a particular feature or something. And that's where things like Aadhaar come in, which are used to verify your real identity. But on the internet, where you have many apps that you use, you create identities, and it is better, we feel, that you create a multiplicity of identities, so that you have one identity which is for your close friends, one for your larger social circle, one for receiving, like a burner ID for receiving, junk mail or whatever. And therefore, we think that digital identity, because the ability of the system to figure out who you are is entirely linked to the ID that you use. And if you're able to use multiple identity for multiple things, then it makes it more difficult for the other guys to figure out exactly who you are. So that's what we think about identity. But Tanuj, you want to add?
Well, roughly that it is what it is. I think one misconception of privacy is that privacy is some sort of binary switch. It's either you have it or you don't. Whereas privacy, even in the real life, let's ignore computers, these devices, etc., is that the person that I am talking to even a Pramath at an Ashoka versus when I am with my friends at Ashoka is different. I reveal different parts of myself to different people in different contexts. That control over what you share with whom, having that granular amount of control is privacy and is the true purpose of digital identity, which is geared towards an individual, as opposed to a digital identity which is used by, say, a Facebook or a Google or a government to know things about you, is how we frame it. But Aadhaar, I've worked on them, I know these issues. I know a lot of people disagree or would read the papers and think that this is not what it is, but it's simply a way of expressing who you are, going and proving to a government or a bank or a telco that this is who I am, so that I can get the service that I'm entitled to in the most convenient, fast, cheap way possible. That's essentially all it does. There is a lot of fear and discussion around this, as there should be discussion around this. But some of the fear, I feel, is overblown, disproportionate. And I think that in itself is a tool of control. People who want you to be scared about something usually have something they want from you, right? Or they need you to do. So I would ask this question both ways. I would ask, why am I being asked to be so scared, right? What is it really that will happen? And once you go down that path, you might find very different answers from what the usual lip service is. And that's all I would have to add on this topic.
So Nandan, you have another fan in the room. We have Prasad here, GV Prasad.
Oh.
And he says that your book talks about the original sin. Prasad, of course, is one of our founders and trustees as well. He talks about the original sin of funding the internet through the advertising revenue. I think this is the whole third crisis connection also. So he's asking, are governments around the world, and specifically ours, ready to take on the cost of building an open interoperable internet like we fund physical infrastructure? How informed and aware are governments on these issues?
No, I think that's a great question, and Prasad is a dear friend. I think in some sense, India is better placed to create a different kind of an internet, partly because over the last decade, we have invested in all these public goods, Aadhaar, UPI, account aggregator, ONDC, and so on. But more importantly, India is not really a great place for revenue from advertising. What happened in the US was that, the US advertising revenue was a few $100 billion across television, print, and cable, and so on. And it's that revenue which provided the fuel for creating advertising, giants, digital advertising giants. And today, if you look at it, companies making billions of dollars from that. India is not an advertising market at all. India's total advertising maybe $12 billion. And the digital advertising in India is hardly $3-4 billion. So you cannot build a business on advertising in India. However, India can build a transaction economy. India can, because, people, and that's where things like UPI are so strategic, because they are very high volume, very low cost transaction things. And that will allow you to buy things where the payment cost is very low and so on. So I think if we can create a transaction economy, and if we can use the data empowerment model that is there in our account aggregator, where people can use their own data and make it portable and go anywhere with it, we can create a whole very, very different internet than the old internet that we have inherited.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Tanuj. Were you saying something?
The one part of the question is, are governments around the globe ready for this? Because of where I work with Nandan, etc., I didn't mention this, but there is a phenomenal amount of incoming interest. I don't know if all of you know that there is something called the Modular Open Source Identity Project, for example, which is essentially the work that Nandan and team did on Aadhaar, has actually been made into an open source project so that other countries can take it. And this has been something that sort of, and the India stack, Pramath, you mentioned it up top. These are things that diplomats in the country are getting incoming requests for from other governments. A lot of my work has also become responding to foreign governments about how they can have digital public infrastructure, how they can have digital public goods. So there is a lot of work happening. We were hoping that this book also starts that conversation, and I'm glad to see that question.
Reena Gupta, who runs our Office of Learning Support, is asking, during this pandemic time, many students at schools as well as colleges have complained about attention deficits as a severe concern, and have gone ahead with the diagnosis as well. Any thoughts you have to share there?
No, I think that's a very valid question. And in some sense, I think the multiplicity of apps and notifications that people get contributes to this, because if I have something and I'm using my computer and I've got 15 different apps open and they're all sending me notifications, my natural temptation is my eye goes to that notification. So when I'm doing something serious, suddenly something pops up and immediately I go and look at it. And people have found that if you keep your devices far away from you, if you shut them off, your attention already always improves. So I think, yes, I think some of these technologies are also creating this attention issue. So I think part of what we recommend, especially when we talk about things like the create mode, is create an environment where you cut out all the notifications, at least for that duration, so that you can remain focused on what you have to do.
We have Venkat here, who's Pro Vice Chancellor, and Venkat is saying, kind of tongue in cheek, that I'm older and closer to Nandan and Tanuj. Did Nandan feel any pangs trying to alter his behavior? What did he have to reboot about himself?
No, well, I mean, I learned a lot of things from Tanuj, and the whole idea. It never struck me that many people actually have different identities. He was talking about on Instagram. What do you call them, Tanuj?
Finstars, fake Instas, right?
Fake Instas. All kinds of. I learned a lot of stuff, and but I think the core principles are the same. How do we be on top of things? How do we create a way to use technology better? How do we design our environment so that when we don't want distractions, we don't have them? So, but overall, I think he helped me to get a much more deeper understanding of how we can use these hacks, as you call them, to make it happen.
We have Vishnupriya, who's also a YF alum and very involved in design and culture and art. And she's saying, as digital overpowers the analog, from literature to education and now to art, what is the one tool hack that can help people cultivate empathy digitally?
Well, I think it's interacting with other human beings. I mean, in the physical world. I think it's being genuinely interested, curious about other people, interacting with them, figuring out what is it that makes them, drives them, what is it that troubles them. I think if you keep your mind and heart open, that's how I think you can build empathy. But I mean, that's just a view. Tanuj, you can add.
No, I was going to say this at some point earlier also in the memory section or whatever. I think one of the reasons, Pramath, you're asking the relationship, I find Nandan is genuinely curious. When he's saying this, right, there are people that when both of us interacted, sometimes I feel a little ashamed that I didn't pick up on some detail or something that somebody mentioned. And Nandan would be kind enough to sort of follow up and ask them about what happened in there, etc. And I think that's honestly, first of all, Vishnupriya she's been really helpful in the book. She's sent her sort of early supporter, I would say, she's pre-ordered, etc. Thank you for that. And the question is, how do you do it more digitally? I would say try and take as many of those interactions offline, as what Nandan is saying also, because it's just much harder to be a mean person in real life, is the truth. If you can't meet offline, I would say just simulate offline and simulate analog as much as you can, such as the Zoom meeting. The metaverse, unfortunately, is genuinely more, real in that sense. The spatial audio, the turning around the head, the avatar, sort of being able to locate somebody in space and time in that way once you wear that headset. These are actually tools that I believe might help us remember that these are not words on the screen, but an actual person behind it. And I'm hoping that both technology and non-technology ways of building empathy sort of develop in people in general. I don't have an answer, frankly, to this. It's just that I'm hoping that we can get there by taking some of this offline.
Yeah, I think some of the things that I was struck by was that on one hand, while you were trying to create a fine balance by saying, we're not saying become a monk and give up technology completely, you are saying add more touch and add more human and add more mind and add more thinking. And So, this John Nesbitt mega trend of high tech, high touch is really where I think perhaps you are heading and the world is heading, which is again perhaps not the answer, but I guess where we are groping for answers. One last question. A lot of what is written and discussed is based on people of our generation that have been very clear distinction between reality and the virtual world. But for children born in the last 2-3 years, these links have blurred. Do you think we need to rethink how we look, interact with, and manage technology?
No, I think this is a very important concern. I mean, I have a 5-year-old grandson, and he spent 50% of his time in the COVID world without school, taking Zoom classes, and I think it's hardly no friends and so on. So I think we have a massive reboot we'll have to do once we are behind the pandemic, where especially our children and our young people who have missed school and who have missed human interaction, we need to do something massively to bring them back and enjoy that aspect of their lives. I think that's very, very critical.
Tanuj, any last words as well, because I'm sort of wrapping up now, and I would love to keep this going, but I do want to keep to time. I respect you guys must be very busy. So Tanuj, any last words, and then we'll leave Nandan the last word.
No, I think I hope. I mean, one is about the book, and then a little more broader because it's the Ashoka community, and I genuinely feel at home here. About the book, I think if I read something about tools and hacks, and this is a book that basically says that, which is my personal learning also, is that you can keep looking for hacks and then you'll be disappointed with them, or you can try and build a system that is based on solid foundational principles that say have lasted sort of helped Nandan for something like 30 years, right? I'm sorry, more than that probably, and then I'm miscounting, 40, 50 years of his sort of work life. And those principles have remained solid even as technology came and went and whatever came and went, and, went from a closed economy to a liberalized economy. Like, it's lasted through all of that, right? So what is this hack that you think you will discover that will change your life, right? So like that's the thing about the book, and therefore think it through. Take some time to think it through, and that's what we hopefully leave as a message for the book. The rest is, I hope there are some people who are early in their journey in Ashoka, either in students right now or whatever, or parents who are thinking about having the students there, children there, and I would say that follow your curiosity, right? Like do this. Don't objectively measure what is the point of this or that or this course or this or whatever, because you don't know. That's the point, right? Nandan today said unknown unknowns in a different conversation we were having. So since you do not know the unknown unknowns, since you do not know what your life is going to look like, your best chance is following your curiosity and finding a space and colleagues which encourage you to do that, which is what I found at the fellowship. So I hope that although it is intangible, although I can't give you a value, I can't give you a CTC, ROI, nothing on those things, I hope you recognize that it still has value.
Yeah. So let me end, Pramath, by saying that Ashoka University is a thread throughout this book. I think Tanuj himself is an Ashoka Young India Fellow. Ela, who helps us with the marketing, is also an Ashoka graduate. Many of the Ashoka people have helped Tanuj in the book itself. So I think you have done a great job in Ashoka of creating a generation of young, bright, confident, inquisitive Indians. And I think that's played a role in this book. So thanks for all the work that you guys do, and to all your co-founders.
Thank you, Nandan. I think we need to have you more involved, but you're busy with so many things that maybe through the book we've claimed you. Thank you so much for your time today. I just really enjoyed the conversation, and I really meant it. It's a really well-written book. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very well done.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, and a special thanks to our panelists Nandan and Tanuj and Pramath for doing this for us. The conversation was really engaging, and I am definitely going to go and read the book. And thank you for your brilliant questions, our audience members. And yes, please go and check out their book. It is a labor of their love. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great week ahead.